today, Emma, and I will pass it over to you.
Thanks, Shelby. Well, hello, everyone. And hi, Bridget. I'm so excited to be here with you. This is, I think, our first session together in the 3 years that both of us have been here, which is pretty wild.
I know, I'm excited too.
Yeah. Yeah. So welcome back. It's been a few weeks since everyone has been here. And for many of you, hopefully you joined us at our yearly summit. If you were there and saw any of the sessions, we'd love to hear your thoughts in the chat as well. We had so many great discussions. We had amazing speakers and a lot of, level 4 and 5 insights, I think, and hopefully. One of the topics we did cover, and we've written about this as well, is our work in understanding the ways that we feel connected in our job, the many ways. And this is something that's been a bit of an aha moment for all of us as we've dove into the research. And Dr. Bridget Lynn has been the primary one here diving into the research. She is our subject matter expert in all things connections, and has done many more things beyond just the research. And so this is what we'll be talking about today. It's an incredibly important topic and still is. I can bring in so many current states of work where we could argue that building these connections could really help cover and solve for. So anything from, the quiet quitting issues that we had last year, where statistics suggested around 60% of individuals were really just doing the bare minimum in their job, essentially completely disengaged, where anywhere from 23 to 33% of individuals, or only 23 to 33%, were engaged globally, which is a real issue, real problem to work to understand. Another recent statistic suggested that about 51% of employees, even at the workplace, are looking for something better, looking for those greener pastures while they're at work. So clearly disengaged from the role that they're playing currently. And then the consistent return to office conflict that seems to keep rearing its horrible head every few months or so. But yeah, that's another issue. And all of these things, and I would suggest that all of these things could be solved for by understanding how to strengthen the connections we have in the workplace. And the one thing that I just want to, toss over to Bridget, just at a high level, in your initial research, what did you see? Thinking about building these connections, what did you see doing so would help solve for?
Yeah. So one thing that's interesting to me about connections is that there's a power for connections to influence outcomes across multiple levels. So we're talking across individuals, teams, and organizations. So even at the individual level, you see things with strong connections, an increase in job satisfaction. You see greater physical and mental well-being, an increase in memory and focus. At the team level, you really start to see that people are building trust, and that allows them also to be more agile and adapt faster. And this often leads to higher performance over a longer period of time. And then also at the organizational level, which I think is really where we try to impact, is that you see lower turnover rates and higher organizational commitment. You see higher engagement with employees, better performance, people interacting together better, which leads to higher innovation and more learning, because there's this openness among people. So in general, I think looking at connections in the workplace provides a really powerful lens to say, how are people connected, and what are those connections influencing in the workplace?
Yeah, I think that's great. And when I think about connection, I immediately think about the human connection. And I know from our understanding of the brain and humans that we've evolved to connect and be associated with others, and find our group essentially, and always look for that, right? We've talked about this so many times, and I would love to really invite. We love chats, right? We love interacting with you all. So especially if this is the first time hearing about our research on connections, the first thing that comes to mind when you think about workplace connections, what is it? What's the first word that comes to mind? And for those that have heard us talk about it, what would you think? What have you been thinking about as you've been kind of like mulling our connections, our clear model around? And I see a lot of chats coming in. What are you thinking about these coming in, Bridget? Love.
Yeah, I know. That was interesting to me. Love. So psychological safety, trust, and belonging, and what I think about those is yes. And I think yes, and so a lot of times when we think about connection, we immediately think about like how we connect with our colleagues at work. And what our research actually found when we were digging in is that there are 4 types of connection at work. So the traditional kind of, and that's where our CLEAR model comes in, right? So the C being colleague, and that's that traditional connection we think about. It's how you connect with people, that belongingness piece, that trust piece. Yeah, thanks, Emma. Exactly. And then the L is leader. So Emma put clear in the thing. So colleague is the C. L is leader. And that's that connection between managers, employees to their managers, their supervisors, and their senior leaders. And then E, which is employer. And that's the connection people have to the organization they're working with. And we're going to go through what each of these, like what indicators are and what's the neuroscience behind each one. But I just want to kind of introduce those. And then you have R, the day-to-day work you do, which is your role. So again, it's clear, colleague, leader, employer, and role connection. And what's interesting is that all 4 types of these connections are linked with how engaged and motivated we are in the work environment, which is what we were seeing coming up in the chat. And it is a little bit hard to pull them apart. Even though there are overlapping aspects, we also have found that each connection also has unique aspects. And so that is just like how they show up, the underlying neuroscience, and what outcomes that they're influencing. And so I think that's been a really interesting part of our research.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I can imagine that when we're able to pull them apart, because they are, while overlapping, they are distinct pieces that might engage us or disengage us in different ways, that we can then maybe add a little bit to one or the other. And you know what's coming up for me as I'm hearing you speak about this and thinking about the 51% of individuals who are currently looking for something else. I think many of us have been in this situation that thinking about, there's something maybe off about where I am right now. And maybe I'm not getting something and I can't put my finger on it, but I'm not going to necessarily leave so easily because I really love my team, or I really love my leader. I love what this organization does in the world, but there's something missing. And I think what we essentially built out is and started to understand is where that push and pull comes from, and that there are these different pieces, and you really do need to have a satisfaction of all of these to really feel embedded and engaged within the role that you're playing, and then this speaks a little bit to, while we won't talk too much about the SCARF model, it speaks a little bit to that as well, is that there are these different drivers or levers that you can pull to increase engagement and work and collaboration and all of those great things that we need in the workplace.
Yeah, absolutely. It allows you to take kind of that more nuanced view of what's happening with connections. And when you're able to see that there's these certain patterns or variations that are happening, it provides you like an initial kind of indicator of where investment of resources might pay off the most. And it provides everybody with this kind of common language as well of how to discuss connections, and connections, is similar to the SCARF model, which we'll talk about, are about the context, right? They're dynamic. It's not just you have this one thing and it never changes. No, it changes. And so being aware of what might be influencing you at any given moment is important for shaping your own experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think let's just talk about this and talk
Sure.
about the research that we've been building. And starting with the first one, maybe the one that I would have initially thought as being the connection, which is with your teammate, your colleague. What does that look like?
Absolutely. So the colleague connection, as you mentioned, is probably most familiar to people, and it's often studied as social connection and focuses on how colleagues support each other professionally and personally. And our research indicated that there are other components in addition to support that are very important, and that includes opportunities to collaborate and how people's work really depends on each other. So that's that piece of task interdependence. What I do influences what you do, and what you do influences what I do. And we can't make a really powerful, complete product or achieve a goal without each other's work. And that's that interdependence thing, which PS, I actually feel like that with you. So I love working with you. And so colleague connection, definitely strong there. But also this piece of the support and interdependence and collaboration are strongest when people communicate. And I'm gonna throw it over to you because a lot of that has to do with neurosynchrony. And I'm just wondering, from your perspective, how does neurosynchrony kind of play into colleague connection?
Yeah, and I will say you stole the words right out of my mouth. I was thinking the same thing. I feel like very strongly connected on the colleague level with you, with many other levels as well.
Right, yeah,
Definitely. And I
awesome.
can see our distinct roles, and I can see how we can collaborate together. And so I can see personally the benefit of having a really strong colleague connection. And I can see that across my whole team as well. But neurosynchrony is a really interesting area of research, and I think it speaks very well to this connection. And it's recently been getting a bit more attention because we can actually record it. So essentially what neurosynchrony is the synchronized electrical activity across brains of individuals working together. So our brains actually synchronize a bit when we're working together, when we're looking at the same story, when we're communicating, and when we're learning from each other. And it's been kind of recorded and looked at in different contexts. So a lot of times it's been looked at in the education context. So how synchronized are students with their teacher when they're learning? You can see this synchronization, and that predicts learning, and it also predicts shared understanding. And so when Bridget and I work together and we're collaborating, I'm sure that even across in a virtual environment, our brains are synchronized a bit. And that indicates that we understand each other. We have a shared understanding, shared expectations, and it leads to more collaboration. And there are so many things that have been linked to that, but I would imagine that when you are satisfied on that level, when you're working as a team, your brains are a bit synchronized. And it feels good. And it's been linked to all sorts of things like pro-social behavior, and the social brain areas are a bit more engaged and involved in this environment. But I would say that when you have better or higher neural synchrony, your team is aligned, and you probably feel that strong connection. And yes, Liz, the electrical activity involves just like higher level brain activity. You can record it with an EEG cap, and that's how they're recording it across like brains of many individuals and their brains in the same room. And so we're seeing how cool this is, and how this is kind of like a new opening of research that we're not me personally, but those researchers are uncovering. It's really fascinating. And there are all sorts of ways that individuals are looking at this. And really interesting question coming in from
Yeah, I saw that.
do unconscious biases play a role in this connection? What would you think?
Absolutely. I mean, when it comes to people interacting together, the answer to that question in my mind is yes. And I think it's an important piece of reflecting on, who am I interacting with? Why am I interacting with certain people over and over again? Who do I listen to the most? And I definitely think when you're critically reflecting on your colleague connection, absolutely that should be a part of it. And that also goes alongside of Rob's question is yeah, like when you're connecting with people more often and more frequently, your neurosynchrony is going to be higher, as well as your task interdependence and the support of each other, just because of that natural way of things coming together and the connection between what you're doing on a day-to-day basis and who you're working with. So yeah, I think those are all critical pieces to be looking at.
Yeah, and I'm imagining that you can work on that too, and you can work on your communication, and it can change over time. So that's definitely, I can really see how that can support teamwork and just like that sense of connection with your team. Yeah, a lot of amazing questions coming in. I'm not sure, Eric, if these connections differ across in-person versus remote. I mean, I would say from personal experience, our company is completely virtual, and I feel a very strong colleague connection with so many people that we work with. So I can imagine that I would predict that it isn't. I could be wrong, and it's a great thing to study.
Yeah, and we will talk a little bit about this initial data we have. We have a few sources of data, and what I would say is we're exactly what Emma's saying. We're not completely sure yet, but there are some trends that we're going to talk about for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So let's go on to the next one, the leader relationship, because I think my first thought before going into the research is, oh, well, do I like my leader? And is that enough? Or do I have shared understanding? So how is that different?
I think you're absolutely right. A lot of times people think about is my leader somebody I like? And I think there's so much more to that, right? We have these leader connections. This is a very important connection within the workplace. And we dug into leader member exchange research so to help inform us and guide us. And essentially, leader member exchange theory is a research model that helps us deeply examine the quality of relationships between leaders and their followers and how that critical relationship influences outcomes. And when it comes to connection, we actually identified 3 important aspects that influence that leader-member relationship quality, so the quality of that relationship. And the 3 things are autonomy, communication, and access to opportunity. And just in general, the idea is that regardless of whether or not someone likes their leader as a person, the relationship also has to feel important and valuable to me as an employee. And I think that is a really important part of that leader connection.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's coming up for me is, and this is something we talk about so often, is how powerful the sense of feeling valued is, kind of linked to the sense of relatedness, like my leader cares about me. But I think more strongly here is that my leader values me on this team. My leader values my role and what I'm producing. And that is so powerful in the brain. I mean, it's as powerful and maybe even more so than receiving a salary, let's say. Your brain tracks that sense that I am valued here, my work is valued, and the more you feel that, the more likely you're going to be engaging in that work and leaning in. And also the sense of autonomy. I mean, having a choice in how you in anything. And this can be something that the leader can decide to provide in different ways. So how are you as a leader providing autonomy to your team? And do they feel like they have a bit of control over how I'm getting my work done, how I'm reaching my goals, like how am I setting up my day and all of that, access to opportunities for the day-to-day and in the future, the future of my role.
Absolutely. And I see a few questions coming in, and Susan actually answered a question with a question. So the 3 things were autonomy, communication, and access to opportunity. And so I align those with feeling valued, because autonomy is I have the ability to complete my work in a way that I feel best. There is a piece of like expertise in there. Additionally, I think that the valued part is when I have access to opportunities and I am chosen for key development opportunities. And I get that information. There really is that sense of I am valued here. People want me to invest. I'm being invested in. And I think that's where the value piece definitely comes in. And I see some things about sense of purpose, which we're getting to. So I'll keep on moving and talk about then the next type of connection, which is really the employer connection. And that is how we connect with our employer. It's about alignment. So what is the alignment between the employer and employee values? How do those values really align with the organizational mission or vision? And the alignment between the everyday work employees engage in and how much it contributes to the achievement of the organizational goal. So really, in the end, employer connection is about the why people do what they do and matching it with an outlet for how to get it done effectively. So this is that piece of I am contributing to the world in some way because this organization holds these values and my work then connects to those values. And when I'm talking about all that, what kind of comes up for you, Emma?
Yeah, absolutely. And the sense of purpose relates really well with this because it is this higher level, kind of higher construal level of why, your individual why, and does it align with what the organization is doing? And it's just, it is something that for years research has shown that having a sense of purpose individually can increase the likelihood of action towards some goal and reaching that purpose and driving forward, like continued forward movement. And having a sense of and I'm losing my train of thought, but being able to get up when grit and all of that resilience, those are the words I'm thinking of. And in the face of challenges, having a sense of purpose allows you to achieve all of those things. And when it in this case, when that sense of purpose agrees with the mission of the organization, how the organization is working in the world, that increases that connection. If there is a disconnection there, you might just not necessarily always choose to do the work towards your organization because you don't see that the value there, and you might be a bit more disengaged. And we'll talk about those, what are the different kind of markers of a lost connection. But this is really more of like a high level individual value system and sense of purpose that aligns with that higher mission of an organization.
Yeah, and I think that it really comes down to this piece of reflection that we're seeing a lot. It's a trend for people to say, we spend a lot of time at work. We invest ourselves in work. And so we want to make sure that our investments are contributing somehow to a greater good, right? And so people are looking to make sure that their personal values are aligned with their organizational values more often. And I think it gives work really that sense of meaning and fulfillment. And exactly like you said, so when you get in the grind, you have the kind of motivation to say, I'm doing this for a reason, and you can connect to that why.
Yeah, absolutely. And I kind of think it's something that's been coming up more and more often. And I wonder if maybe the more people reflect on this and talk about it, the more people question themselves. And so I do see this as an increased conversation.
Yeah, I do too. And there's that's kind of like the higher purpose piece. And connected in that, which is, part of that overlapping piece, is that your day-to-day work matters in how you're able to kind of express those values and how they contribute to the achievement of the mission and the goals. And that's kind of within that last connection of role connection. And that's how an individual relates to their workplace role, responsibility, and tasks. And this is really about how we find motivation and satisfaction in our work. It really includes how well we understand what we are and aren't responsible for, what's expected of us, and the ways we can grow and develop in the positions that we hold. And really, all of these are about clarity. And clarity, just at a basic level, means that something's easy to understand with little need for interpretation. And clarity helps provide that aspect of certainty, which really starts sending reward signals and helps people engage in a way that allows them to use their cognitive energy in the work they're doing versus navigating relationships. And this is something we were talking a little bit about, in our preparation of what does this mean when people have this kind of motivation and how they kind of reflect on what they do every day, and how does that relate to that role connection?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a tough one because, but I think we can all relate to this. I mean, when you think about the role that you're playing, do you see, are you seeing your role as matching how you view yourself? Like, what is your ideal sense of self, and are you working towards that? And is your ideal sense of self in that role, or a role that you can move into? And if that there is that alignment, and the clarity helps with being able to see that and not have to be have any uncertainty about what am I doing, and how does my day to day match that sense of ideal self. And there's plenty of research showing that when individuals are working towards a goal, if that goal achieves some kind of ideal sense of self, they're more likely to choose that task to get there, to reach that goal, than if it doesn't match that. So it's a bit more of a maybe deeper level of construal than kind of like the employer, the organizational level. This is, what am I doing in my role? And do I feel like my role matches how I view myself?
Yeah, which I think is important, right? We spend so much time at work, and I hear all the time like work doesn't define who you are, and my response always is yes, and right, because we spend so much time at work that I think it is an important defining environment of our life. And for me personally, it's difficult to separate out that, like, because I invest a lot of myself in my job, and so I think that alignment is an important piece.
Yeah, so many great comments coming in. I love this one from Michael that talked about working remotely, and like how do you feel when you come face to face with people that you've worked with remotely? And I mean, I will know just from experience, it is building that connection virtually is enough to feel like you've already had that collaboration. I feel like it's just as easy to collaborate in person after you've built the connection virtually.
I totally agree with that. And I will use our example. Like we didn't meet for the longest time, right? And then I was going to a wedding close to where Emma lives, and it's hysterical, really, because I came with my entire family. I felt like I had been like meeting with Emma in person forever. I introduced her to my like 96-year-old Aunt Mary, like my brothers, my sister, my mom, like, and Emma was just there in the crowd, and we were drinking coffee, and it was awesome. And it didn't feel as if it were the first time I was meeting you, for sure.
Right. Yeah, we started right from, so we didn't have to start from scratch to build that sync,
Yeah,
I would say.
exactly. Now, do I love in-person hugs? Absolutely. I think it is a great part. And it's like being strategic about when you come together and bring people in. And I think that is a part of the conversation we've been having with the return to office, is that when you are not considering all of these connections, you can misstep, right? So there is joy in person. And if we force in person, sometimes we are neglecting some of the other connections that are important to people. And it's not a one size fits all.
Right. Absolutely. And I think that really leads really nicely to the next. So we've talked about, what each of these connections may look like, how it really engages the brain, but I think, and we're going to lead there eventually, is sometimes we're not getting all of those connections met
Right.
well enough or satisfied enough. So what does that look like? What could each of these, disconnected connections look like in the workplace? How would it show up?
Yeah, I think for me, when I think about colleague connection, and if that is a connection that is not being fulfilled with someone, for someone, I think they would feel the sense of kind of isolation. They may feel a sense of competition with the people they're working with versus this piece of cooperation of us working together means we're making something better. And instead you might see like a us versus them, like I need to get the credit for this versus the we part of it. In leader connection, if that is not a connection that's being fulfilled, I see that kind of coming out in disparity of opportunities, right? So people feeling as if only certain people get opportunities. I also think there would be a bit of kind of disgruntled rumbling amongst employees, possibility about like favoritism or something like that. For employer connection, I would imagine if that is not being fulfilled, you would see a really strong sense of disengagement and possibly that feeling of people just kind of clocking in and clocking out and not that degree of investment and motivation. And then if role connection weren't met or fulfilled, I think you would see low job satisfaction and basically people don't like what they do. And so you would not see a lot of growth and innovation and creativity because people wouldn't want to kind of invest themselves in that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is really hitting hard for me. I think that reflecting on previous jobs and things like that, what was kind of missing, you can kind of see each of these pieces really coming out. And I'm sure it's hitting home for a lot of individuals as well, which brings us to how would we even find this out, right? So this is a really important thing to kind of pull apart. And we saw that as we started diving into the research. And as you were promised, we are going to be talking about this assessment that Bridget really was the mastermind behind. So I'd love for you to give us just a brief overview of this relationship and how we built it. And then we'll talk about what we've been finding.
Absolutely. So this idea started at last year's summit, which is also just another shout out of why coming together at Summit is so important. So Khalil Smith, who is at Akamai, and our CEO, David Rock, sat down and had this conversation about connections. And Khalil said, hey, I'm noticing that people are talking a lot about connection at work and what does that mean? Khalil said, I started talking to people like, well, what do you mean by connection? When you say you're wondering about connection, what comes to mind? And it was not only that that kind of social connection piece, but also the organizational and somewhat of the role. And so Khalil came to us and I started working with him and really dove into the research. And that's where we saw that fourth piece of connection come up as that leader piece, which is actually a bit different than the organizational one. So, it was just really going into the research, talking to Khalil, talking to people at Akamai, talking to amongst our research team. And then we said, all right, these are the four types of connection and why we think this. We justified it with all of our research. And so we, from there, generated items for an assessment. And when we did that, we then did a subject matter expert review. And then we did a pilot with the refined measure. And that pilot led to deep data analysis. And we refined the scale and the wording and made it crisp and clean. And now we have a validated measure that we are doing a little bit more validation work, but it's really anchored in not only like existing research, but also in our like rigorous methodology and our ability to say, hey, this is unique from existing constructs like psychological safety. We know that there is a relationship there, but our data is showing us that actually it's a bit different. So it can add to the explanation. And so that's kind of where we are. We've got a few initial sources of data, and we're looking to kind of begin this collaborative relationship with people to say, hey, this is a really useful, rigorous, validated measure that can help with organizational discovery.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I know this is really leading to us, looking at what do these kinds of assessments mean? And I'm sure that individuals out there are imagining, well, what would it show for me? Maybe already predicting. And I would love to hear maybe in the chat where you think maybe you're not getting like super fulfillment in each of these connections. Like, where do you predict you might be missing out on, or do you feel completely fulfilled across all 4 connections? And I can imagine, though, that if an organization was to look at this, that the culture within that organization, that like the culture that it creates can have a huge impact on what the assessment would show. So if all employees took it, that culture is going to dictate what the assessment shows. So it's likely to be context dependent. And with that in mind, we do have some of this early data that Bridget is mentioning from a single organization, and keeping in mind that what she's going to share is really not suggesting anything about other organizations, but this is a single organization. So really telling them, what do we need? What could we maybe change? And what are we doing well? So what have we been showing or seeing?
I love this because I love kind of digging into the data, and I'll say to everyone, spoiler alert, we are going to give you access to the Clear Connections profile so you can take it yourselves as well. So I'm excited for that. And I also am excited to hear feedback and things. But anyway, we do have data from a few different sources, and as you mentioned, Emma, we're going to really focus on data from a single organization because it kind of gives us the freedom to talk about what it looks like in a specific context, because as we've been talking about, it is context dependent. And so in this organization, what we're seeing at like the very high level is that role connection is rated as being really important to many people and is the least experienced type of connection. So really what we're doing with this assessment is we're coming up with fulfillment scores, and that fulfillment score is the relationship between how important something is to me and how much I experience it in my environment. So what we're seeing at this organization is that there's a low fulfillment score in role connection. And the cool part about this is that we're able to look deeper into the data, and we can see that the role connection results really are tending to be lower. And again, this is initial data. They're tending to be lower among people holding senior individual contributor positions and people holding manager and supervisor roles. And so, we ask like from entry level, individual, mid-level, senior level, manager, senior leader, then C-suite. So like there's lots of different options for that. The other piece we're seeing is that in organizations that are, in this organization, which is hybrid, that people working in person are actually having less of a role fulfillment, role connection fulfillment than people that are working remotely or hybrid. So it's just interesting. There's many layers that we're going to be able to peel back. And this initial data shows us that it is going to matter, that context is going to matter. And there's going to be pieces that we can look at that help us determine where we might intervene.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And I love data just as much as you do. I think this is fascinating. And one thing that maybe this organization could take away is, we're doing well at providing or allowing the environment for a colleague connection. They feel connected to each other. Our leaders are doing a great job in building and fostering that connection. They feel connected to the mission, like what we're doing in the world. All of those things are great. So then if we think, okay, so this is the piece that seems to be, unfulfilled on like the larger level for individuals, and specifically those individuals. So what could they do then with this?
Yeah, and I really love the way that you framed that, because that's absolutely right. And I think that's an important piece of just kind of discovery in general, is that a lot of times organizations, we're focused on the deficit because that means that there's a challenge or a problem. And a lot of times when people come to NLI, they come they've sought us out because there is something they want to change or a challenge or something that's come up. And another piece of that is, what are the things you're doing well? And I think that's the beauty of this assessment, is that in addition to kind of identifying areas that are challenging or could use improvement, you also get to identify assets. Like, hey, we're actually doing this stuff really well. And that gives you that ability to have a more comprehensive conversation of, how do we play off of our strengths, or how can we apply what we're doing here to somewhere else? So just, I think that is such a wonderful reminder. And you kind of made me think about that when you were talking, but to talk about addressing challenges. So what we're saying about the Clear Connections profile is that really it is about that initial discovery place, honing in on a place to lean in, and the results can be used to understand what's most impactful for client engagement, which really informs the design and implementation of like practical actions to get to a desired state. And so as we were talking about, this particular company has a low fulfillment in role connection. And one way that can be addressed is if you have more constructive conversations with your employees about their performance and where they see themselves currently and in the future. We have solutions like Connect or Improve that can help leaders have those high quality, productive conversations and provide useful and balanced feedback. And thinking through something like Develop, like those career conversations to say, what motivates me and how can I make sure that I'm connected in a way that allows me to have satisfaction in my job? And there's aspects of all of that developing and nurturing role connection in our Lead solution, which really helps leaders engage in a way that may improve role connection. And again, these things are interrelated, and there's overlapping parts, but as you kind of think through the relatedness as well as the uniqueness, you can see how something like Lead and leader connections could also influence role connection. And while these things really kind of hinge on SCARF and ways to provide clarity, it really also helps leaders understand where an individual sees themselves in the future and can give clarity and think through ways to get there. And then just like if somebody's having an organization seeing patterns of low colleague connection, we can really think through crafting a social strategy for connectedness. If they're seeing low employer connection, it might be refreshing or refining a mission, values, vision type of work, or possibly, employee value proposition. If you're seeing low leader connection, it could be about leadership principles. So really, I think it's in the end about a conversation with organizations and saying, this is what's coming up. What can we do, or where should we invest?
Yeah, absolutely. And things that are coming up to me is, maybe it's just looking into your processes and your systems, and is there a disconnect there with maybe you have it in place but you're not communicating it well, and maybe like the perception is just not there, and so and is there a decoherence someplace in your set of systems that is resulting in an unfelt value in their role or with each other, or things getting in the way, or if there's overwhelm. I know we Liz mentioned something about overwhelm and having too many tasks, and that they don't necessarily feel fulfilled in. So there's a lot of really great comments coming up.
Mm-hmm.
Alan, a thought about neurosynchrony in work with clients or partners. I think that's really interesting thought, and maybe definitely important when you're thinking about that relationship. I am absolutely sure that needing a sense of neurosynchrony or building neurosynchrony between clients and partners, obviously it leads to shared understanding. So absolutely.
Yeah. And I really love the comments that are coming up. And One thing we've been talking a little bit about is this idea of like the organizational patterns. And one thing that comes up when we're talking about clear connections is, and this came up internally as well, is okay, so you have a new assessment, and yet a bunch of people are experiencing survey fatigue. So why would you give them something else to fill out or something else to do? And for me, I really think about the Clear Connections profile as a developmental tool and not a survey. So I think about it as being the difference between a survey giving information to someone else to kind of think through. And this professional development tool is giving you individual results that can help you understand how your connections impact your work experience and also what you can do to shape it. And so if an individual wants to take it, there really is an opportunity to reflect, to think about, what do I want my work experience to look like? How can I grow in my job? How can I give myself kind of this purposeful direction in what I'm doing? And so to me, that's the beauty of the Clear Connections, is that people who take it not only have the chance to influence the organization level with their thinking and their thoughts and their experience, they also get this results that allow them to reflect and think through, what do I want to do going forward? So I think that's really a great part of this as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So you as an individual can use it for yourself and maybe also reflect on, am I in the right place for me? And also it's not just always about the organization taking action. You can also take action if you are missing, something about your role. Let's say the individual can maybe ask about, is there an opportunity to get into another role? This might not be, I love the organization. I love working with my leader, but maybe there's something else that I can learn and do. So there is something and that in action that individuals can take too by taking it. So it's really for anyone as well. And I would say beneficial for organizations or individuals.
Absolutely. I think, to me, the biggest part of benefit is if organizations use this Clear Connections profile as a discovery tool. So to invest in this, to say, all right, what is happening at a large level? And at the same time, you will get not only those organizational patterns, but you also allow employees to feel invested in, because you are saying, here is a professional development tool that allows you to reflect on your experience. It kind of gives you an idea of where to focus your energy. So to me, I love the idea of it being used at an organizational level and people being motivated to provide the data you need to change your organization, because they get their own results and can think through that as well. So to me, I think that's the real benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would love to hear if anyone on the line is thinking about this as an opportunity for your organization. So, as David often does, if you'd like to, maybe drop your company name and Clear in the chat. But also we will be dropping the link itself for the survey in the chat as well. So
you can do that right now. So we can I'll drop the link to the Clear Connection. I did my own drum roll in my head there. So there it is for everyone to take. And please, I would love to hear from you. The last question in there is asking for feedback, and I genuinely want your feedback. And so, I know that this audience in particular is so thoughtful and engaging. And I always love the comments that come up. So please feel free to share those with me as well.
Yeah. Absolutely. So I think we're just about ready to close up. This was a fantastic conversation. I'm so thrilled that we were able to do this together. We'll have to do this again soon.
I know. It felt very easy. So thank you for that. Your level of kind of preparation and support is always makes my life and job easier. So thank you.
Thank you. And yeah, and I guess I hope you all have a wonderful weekend, and we'll be back here next week, next Friday.
Yep. Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Emma and Bridget, for today's discussion. We appreciate your time as always, and you both truly embody all of the qualities you spoke about today. Now for closing, we are going to have a poll, so let us know how NLI can help you. Also, if you enjoyed today's conversation, you'll love the podcast show, so make sure that you subscribe and listen to Your Brain at Work wherever you listen to your podcast. And on behalf of our team behind the scenes, we appreciate you always being here. Thanks so much, and we'll see you again next Friday.